welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over how to do color changes, how to add texture into your blanket, and most importantly, how to maintain the selvage edge while doing both. And for example, sorry if the camera's a little shaky, but I'll show you on the edge here that I have a purl row right here, but on the side it remains a knit stitch. So I'll show you how to do that. And you also see that the colors are not overlapping each other, and there's a trick to that, but this is going to be the most important part of the blanket to keep a nice edge, even though you have purl rows to add texture into your blanket. I'll also be going over how to add hearts into your blanket. I did quickly want to say that I will be working on my loom today, but you do not have to be working on a loom to follow along and follow the same exact instructions. I will also be using my chart from my Dotted Hearts pattern. I will be demonstrating rows 1 through 13 during this video just to show you guys how it's done and what everything means. Okay, so I'm going to start in my first color, which is ivory, for my cast on. I'm only going to be working on 12 stitches on 12 pegs because I don't want to remake the blanket, but it's going to look, it'll be the exact same for you guys, okay? So to start off, you're going to do your slip knot and leave about a 6 to 8 inch tail. And then you're going to cast on the length that you're doing for your pattern. So to cast on, I have a new method of casting on to help with the looseness of this stitch. So I put my slip knot on, and then I take my working tail and tuck it up and under the stitch. And then I pull it out like this, making a new loop. Put your working yarn on top, and then you're just going to cast on as normal. I pull it to the next peg and make a loop around that peg. Just like that. Catch the yarn. And I'm going to cast on for just the 12 stitches that I'm working with. And you make sure that your working yarn is in between the last 2 pegs. Okay? So row 1 is done. So I'm going to get my row counter and I'm just going to move it up to 1 just so I can keep better track on the chart, okay? So row 1 is done, and now I have 1, 2, 3 rows to knit in this main color, okay? So I'm going to do that, and then I'll meet you back. Great, so I'm coming up on my last stitch here, and I'm going to knit it. And when you're working on the loom, you're going to want to make sure that your yarn is in between the last 2 pegs, okay? That's to effectively skip this stitch on the next row. So now when I knit row 3, because we just knit row 2 right here, we went this way for row 2. Now when we knit row 3, I'm skipping this first stitch, and then I'm going to be knitting back down, okay? So now we have just completed row 2. And then once I start, I'll be on row 3. So now I'm skipping this stitch and knitting this one. And now I'm going to change it to row 3. When I'm knitting like a really big blanket, I always knit the first stitch or maybe the first 5, and then I change the row to the row that I'm on. So now we're on row 3, and we're going to knit all the way down once again. If you need lessons on how to do the knit stitch and such on the loom, I do have a beginner's video that you can go ahead and watch, and then come back to this one for help with the pattern, okay? Right, now I'm knitting my last stitch, and as I'm knitting it, I'm making sure the yarn is staying in between the 2 pegs and putting my last stitch on. Okay, that's row 3 complete. Now I'm going to skip this first stitch. I'm not knitting it. I'm knitting the second stitch, and then I'm going to change my row counter to row 4. Looking back at the chart, we are on row 4 right here and working our way down. Okay, so I have just knit my second to last stitch, and as you can see in the pattern, the next row is a different color. Row 5 is the pink color that we have, okay? So that means that on row 4, at the second to last stitch, I need to change color. To change color, you're going to need your scissors and your lighter. As you can see, I've already knit this stitch. So I'm going to lift it up and I'm going to look at where the yarn is coming out of the back of the stitch, and I'm going to grab it right here. And then I'm going to pull the stitch out that I just knit. Do not let go of this. And we are going to cut it right there. This is so the color change happens in the stitch so you can't see it. I like to pull off any of the loose stuff and put it in my cup right here. You're going to want to flatten out the edge until you find that center line that's in there. It feels hard. It's like a piece of filament. And you're just going to flatten it out. And then you're going to take your next color. And I always like to start with a fresh edge. So I'm just going to clip right here and do the same thing. Flatten it out until you find that middle piece. Which is right there. And then I'm going to hold the two pieces together. You want to be careful. Fire is hot, it will burn your house down. Use common sense when you're working with fire in your home. You want to be in a well-ventilated area and you don't want to burn everything on your loom. I usually have a cup of water around, which would be a good idea for you at home. So I'm going to hold them both. And I'm going to try to catch that middle piece of filament on fire, like so. And you want to attach it to this other piece of filament right here. And then I like to push it together. Be careful, you will burn your fingers. You should be able to feel a connection point inside. It's like a little ball. And I'm just manipulating the ball, making it bigger, pushing the two ends together to make sure that it is a secure connection. Once it's cooled down enough for you to touch, you can give it a tug like this. If it feels like it's coming apart at all, you need to restart because it will come apart later in the wash or at any other time, okay? Okay, so now we've added our new color. We need to re-knit the second to last stitch. And you can see that the pink is not coming through right here. So we did it correctly. Okay, if it's coming through, then you need to readjust your stitch size and try to hide the color change. And now we are going to knit the last stitch. This is for every row. Oops. Make sure your yarn's in between the two pegs. And this is going to be for every row unless otherwise specified in the pattern. And there is a spot where it's specified otherwise. Now we're going to start row 5. So this X right here represents a skip stitch. And I only wrote the skip stitch on the purl rows just to kind of help you remember that we're going to be skipping this one and then purling the rest until we get to the knit at the end, okay? So to purl, we're going to bring the yarn in the front, and this is to add texture to your blanket, okay? So we have the yarn in the front of the work, and we're going to pick up your stitch and push the yarn through to the back instead of pulling it through the front to do a knit stitch. And you know that it's a purl because now you have a bar. When you do a knit stitch, you have a V underneath. When you do a purl, you have a bar underneath, okay? And now we're going to purl all the way down. Just change this to row 5. And we're going to continue to purl. I tend to purl just a little bit tighter than my knit stitches because they seem to be looser than my knit stitches in my final work. So I try to compensate for that and purl them a little bit tighter than what I would a knit stitch. Okay, now we are purling our second to last stitch. The next row, as you can see on row 6, is the ivory color, okay? When we're changing colors and we're on a purl row, we have to change colors a little bit differently. Now, the difference when you change color on a purl row is that instead of cutting it right here where it's underneath your second to last stitch, you're actually going to knit your stitch, and then right where it's going underneath this bar, that's where you're going to cut it. Not where it's coming out of this stitch, but where it's going underneath the knit bar. Okay, that way the color change happens here instead of here. Okay, so right where it's coming out, we're going to take the stitch off, grab it where it's coming out, and undo the stitch. Don't let go of your spot. And then you're going to cut it right there. And add in your new color. And then give it a tug, make sure that it's nice and tight, and then it's not going to come apart on you when you're washing your blanket, okay? And then now I'm going to knit this stitch, and you can see that the color change happened underneath this bar, so we still have a little bit of pink here to make it match the rest. And now we're going to knit row 6. So row 6 is a little bit different because the next row is row 7, and we have these dotted hearts. So when we do our color change on row 6, instead of changing colors on the second to last stitch here, we need to change color at the end of the row, and I'll show you why once we get there. So I'm going to change to row 6. Oops. And I'm going to knit my way down. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. So we just knit row 6, and we need to do a color change so we can have this, our darker color pattern, okay? But because we always skip the first stitch, so row 7, this will be our skip stitch right here. Because we always skip that stitch, we need the color to happen over here. I hope I'm making sense. So we're going to change the color here, skip this stitch, and then knit this one. So that's where the new color is going to be. Right over there, okay? So I'm going to knit my last stitch in this color. I'm going to pull it out where it's coming out of the back of the stitch and do my color change. And this is going to add in my heart color, just flattening out the ends and doing my color change, adding in my new yarn. Okay, so give it a tug, make sure it's not going to come out, and then I'm going to re-knit my last stitch, and you can see it's coming up the ivory color, right? So right here for our skip stitch, we still want the ivory. Okay, so now we're going to row 7. I'm going to put row 7. Our first stitch is ivory, and we're skipping it, and now our second stitch is going to be our darker color, and now we're going to knit it. So this is going to be adding in our heart, okay? And now we can see that we need to change color once again for the next 2 stitches to ivory. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to undo our stitch, pull it out where it's coming out of the back of the stitch, and cut it, and then add in our ivory. Okay, so you're going to re-knit your heart, and now you're going to knit the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2. but now you see that you have another heart to add in. So we're going to undo this stitch, grab it where it's coming out of the stitch, and cut it here, and add in your dark color once again. And then you're going to repeat this process down to the end of the row. And I will meet you right here because it's a little bit different. Instead of knitting 2 ivory, we're going to knit just 1 ivory at the end, okay? So that's where I'll meet you. Okay, guys. So I'm coming up on my last darker color change. I know that I'm only working with a certain amount of stitches, but the pattern's staying the same all the way across. So technically I'm working with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'm working with 12 stitches. So I am about to do this stitch right here. Okay? But for you, I'm just going to say that we're over here. Knit my second to last stitch. And right here, this is our second to last stitch. The next stitch needs to be ivory. So we're going to change once again back to our lighter color. Now we're done with this darker color for now. And I'm going to knit our last dark color. And then we're going to knit our last stitch. And now we're going to work down row 8. Knit our first stitch, get our row counter, change it to row 8, and knit all the way down. Okay, so I am knitting my second to last stitch. When you're working on your hearts, don't be dismayed if they look a little funny right now. You just need to stretch down your work, okay? Okay, so we just completed row 8, and we can see that row 9 is our medium color. So we're going to change color at the second to last stitch right here because we need the medium color up there, okay? So we just knit our second to last stitch. We're going to undo it and change color, okay? Now I'm going to knit my second to last stitch once again and knit my last stitch, which will show my new color coming through, okay? And then now we are on row 9, and rows 9 through 11 are going to be this color. So I'm going to go ahead and knit all of those, and then I will meet you back at the end of row 11 for the color change and the purl row. Okay guys, so I have made it to the end of row 11, and as you can see on the chart here, row 12 is going to be a purl row. Okay, so, and it's also an ivory row. So we're on our second to last stitch. We're going to change color here because that's where we always change color unless otherwise specified. Okay, so I'm going to grab my ivory and do my last stitch. So now I'm going to reknit my second to last stitch. A little bit of white showed through, so I'm just going to make it a little bit tighter. Fix that, okay? And now I'm going to knit my last stitch, keeping my yarn in between the last 2 pegs, okay? Now, we just knit our last stitch here. This was our last stitch that we knit, and now we're going up. The X represents a skip stitch. Again, I only put the skip stitches on the purl rows just to help you kind of remember that we're not purling that stitch, okay? Now we're going on to stitch number 2, which is here, and we're going to purl down to the end stitch here, which we're going to do a color change after this purl, and then we will knit the last stitch with the new color, which would be this pink once again, okay? So remember to purl, we keep our yarn in the front, and we push it to the back. Okay? Purl. And I've made it to my second to last stitch. I'm going to go ahead and knit this stitch just so I can see where I need to do my color change at, and you want it right where it's going underneath this bar. So we're going to pull it out right here, and I'm going to cut right there instead of underneath this bar, because we don't want the color change to happen here. We want it to happen over here when it's going into the next stitch. Okay, so we've just done our second to last stitch. Now we're getting our new lighter pink color for row 13 going. This little circle here means that it's going to be a knit stitch. So I'm going to knit the last stitch, bringing my yarn up in between the two pegs, and then we will go back to knitting back down for row 13. Now I'm just going to bring you in for a close-up. Okay, so I just want to show you the edges. We've done multiple color changes. None of the colors are overlapping, like this pink is not up here where it shouldn't be in the white row. For the purl rows, we can see that there's texture all the way across, but on the ends, it stays a knit stitch. There's no texture on the ends. The same for up here, where we just did the purl row. You can see that it's not going to have any texture. And then the hearts look lovely as well. That's how you change color, add hearts, and add texture to your blanket while maintaining a nice looking edge. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you found it helpful in your chunky blanket making, and if you made it to the end of this video, you're awesome. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more tutorials like this one, and if you're interested in purchasing the pattern that I've been working on in the video, it is linked in the description below. As always, I would love to see anything that you guys make, so tag me on Instagram or even send pictures on Etsy. I don't care, I just like seeing everybody's projects. Thanks so much for watching guys. I'll see you in the next one.